Let's bring out my good friend Ryan Dowd.
Good evening. What'd you think? Yeah. So I could talk about the movie all night, but I don't think you want to hear it from just me. So Emilio, why don't you come on up?
Thank you. I feel so exposed. Thank
All
you.
right,
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks. It's so great to be here and to be able to share the film with you. I don't know how much of you know, we're on a national tour right now. We're going to screen the movie. We're sort of halfway through, screen the film. Probably by the time we get to New York, it'll have been 30 cities over a 6-week period. Maybe more, maybe a couple more, maybe 35. Anyway, so this stop was very important for us for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was this is where Hesed House lives. This is where so much wonderful work is being done by Ryan. And the film speaks directly to the work that Ryan and Hesed House are doing in addressing this, we really need to call a crisis. And they're dealing with it and getting underneath the skin of it in ways that should be the model for how the rest of the country should be handling this. So my hat's off to you, man, to the work you're doing.
All right, let's dive into some questions. So where'd this movie come from? Where'd the idea come from?
So this journey began about 12 years ago, April 1st, 2007. The LA Times was delivered to the house. In one of the sections of the paper, there was an article written by a retiring Salt Lake City librarian named Chip Ward. Chip was I think the assistant director at the library, and the thesis of his essay was that libraries had become de facto homeless shelters, and that librarians had become first responders and de facto social workers. And it was, in his words, not what we went to library school for. And so I was so moved by the piece that I took a trip down to my local library, the downtown LAPL, the Central Library Branch, and where I'd done the bulk of the research for a film that I did before that called Bobby. So I knew the world that Chip was talking about, but I didn't realize that it had become, that it really had changed and was now this epidemic. It was not specific to Salt Lake City. It was happening now across the country. And so I was moved, I was inspired by it. I began to imagine a story, what it would look like if the patrons on a particularly cold night decided not to leave, how law enforcement would react, how politicians would react, how the media would spin it. And again, this is back in 2007, before we all know that, what you saw on screen tonight, a lot of it is accurate. This is how they spin it. This is how they criminalize and continue to criminalize the poor and people who are marginalized. So in the 12 years that it's taken for me to make this movie, it's become, sadly, more relevant now than it would have been had I made it 10 years ago. So that is the sort of the elevator pitch of how we have arrived now, screening this film for you. So it's been a long journey, and I when I see the movie, when I watch and I stand in the back of the theater, and I still sweat. I'm still nervous. I'm still, worried that that the jokes aren't going to land, and that the emotion's not going to be there, and that people are going to walk out. And I don't sit through a screen or stand through a screening without feeling that. But every time that you react the way that the audience reacts to the jokes, I feel a lot less crazy, and I feel like the last 12 years have not been in vain, and so I'm grateful to you. Thank you.
This next question's from a director of a local library. Librarians are part information guru, part book whisperer, part technology maven, part social worker. Has making this movie changed your perception of librarians or enhanced it, or?
So librarians were the first Google. When you think about it, right? Libraries are where facts live. We know that. Libraries are spin-free zones. And what I like to do is I like to quote Anne Lamott, whose new book, Almost Everything is just a miracle in and of itself. But she says communities without libraries are like radios without batteries. And I believe that. I think that what Eric Kleinenberg talks about in his new book, Palaces for the People, that the libraries are the cornerstone for what he coined social infrastructure. So if you want to know how a community is doing, visit the library. That is going to be a good barometer to tell you how a community is doing. So, what did I learn about libraries? That while making this, is we can't live without them. We can't have a working social atmosphere without libraries being at the center of that.
Emilio, how did you choose the actors?
Well, they chose me to a certain extent. I was very fortunate. I wrote a script that landed with all of these wonderful people you see on screen. Christian Slater and Jacob Vargas were the only two that I had worked with previously. I met Alec about 30 years ago, and I hadn't talked to him since. So basically, this was they said yes. Now, we shot the movie in 22 days, which is good news, bad news. The good news is you have to really think on your feet, and you have to have you really have to have made the movie about 30 times before you get there, because it's all in the prep. The good news is that you go to Alec Baldwin, you go to Christian Slater, you go to Gabrielle Union, you say, I only need you for 5 days. So it's a very short commitment, because as you know, you see all these people all the time. They're very busy. And the fact that it all worked out schedule-wise is just one of those great miracles. And I believe you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, both in front and behind the camera. And this is a great support group that came to play in our sandbox.
Where'd you get the idea for everybody to get naked?
So there was a version of this movie where the script and story that was much darker, much more diabolical. That was the version that was supposed to get up and running in 2008. When the financial crisis hit, we lost our funding. And I'm actually grateful for that, because it allowed me another 10 years to sit in it, marinate in it. When I had some time to reflect on what this movie should be about, I really came to the point where it needed to celebrate nonviolent social disobedience, and how best to diffuse this situation, and how best to disarm law enforcement than to disrobe. Because, and I talked to a lot of law enforcement individuals about this, and I said, how do you deal with naked guys? They say, oh man, we're really uncomfortable. And I said, well, why? He says, because we never really know where to grab. And so I was like, okay, well, that's a step in the right direction. But all jokes aside, I thought how best to diffuse this in using our humanity, using our vulnerability. And it is that sort of that Christ on the cross moment where you're completely broken and you're completely naked and you're shattered, and there you lay yourself bare, and you dare them to further beat you down, and they can't, obviously. So I just thought it was
I did not write this next one. This is not my handwriting, but it does say, Emilio, what'd you learn from Ryan? Moving on.
Ryan Dowd is the most honorable man I have ever. No. No, we. I don't know if you know how we.
That's the next question. How we got connected.
Is it? Yeah.
That's the next question. So, go ahead.
Aside from that fact, you're my favorite author.
That's right.
No. Yes. Of course you are. I was screening the film in Santa Barbara at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, and we had some contact on Facebook.
I'd gotten a Facebook friend request from him, and I thought it was my buddy Dave, so I typed Dave a nasty message back, but it wasn't Dave. And so Facebook led to email, led to phone calls, led to, hey, why don't you come out to the Santa Barbara Film Festival to watch the movie? And now you can continue.
And then a question came out of the Q&A, and I really want to be careful that I stay in my lane in this. I'm a filmmaker first. I'm a storyteller. I'm an actor, a director. I'm not a LCSW. I'm not a librarian. I don't run a homeless shelter. So I want to make sure that when I give an answer, it is my opinion, but it's not based on a lived experience. So I got in the deep end of the pool. I looked at Ryan in the audience and said, there's a gentleman here that can answer this question more qualified than I am. So why don't we bring him up? And you've been here ever since. How do I get rid of you? Like a sticky booger.
Leave me in.
Yeah. Right.
Cut the camera. Next question. No, but we've done so many cities now. We're about 2/3 of the way through now.
Yes.
And have a bunch more in it, and we'll finish up in New York City for the premiere right before it comes out in theaters for everybody who didn't get to see it before it came out. But for me, it's been really exciting to be a part of this project and to help advance this movie. And if I can play a little role in more people seeing it and really raising the dialogue around homelessness, because this movie does something that Hollywood almost never gets right, almost never, and that's humanizing homelessness in the full spectrum of humanity. Because most movies that come out of Hollywood about homelessness, either they take every stereotype, every negative stereotype, and they create this caricature of bad decisions, or they do the exact opposite and they create this noble poor person who's never done anything wrong, unlike every human being who's ever existed. And what I think this movie did better than any movie that I can think of, and certainly in recent memory, is it captured the full spectrum of homelessness, from happy to sad to funny to angry and everything in between. And it really honored the individuality in homelessness in a way that Hollywood just never gets right, which is why I'm willing to use up an enormous amount of my vacation time in order to travel the country and talk about this movie and get people seeing it. So.
And the real saint here?
What's that?
Chrissy.
Yeah.
And I can hear her in the background. You're going where? Why? For how long? You guys are just going to go out and drink tequila. I know you're not doing anything. There's no movie stuff going on.
Well, I'm going to skip the question about what's it like traveling the country together. You just described it. Emilio, what's your favorite movie that you've worked? You've worked on a lot of movies, and what's your favorite movie that you've worked on and why?
You just saw it. This is the film. I've been doing this a long time. I've been working in the industry for 35 years, and I've made a lot of crap. And I've made movies that I'm not proud of. And about 20 years ago, I decided to take a left turn and start doing movies for me rather than for other people. And this is a result of that. It started with a picture called The War at Home, where I played a Vietnam veteran suffering from PTSD, then Bobby, then a Picture the Way. Again, these are movies that don't necessarily push the blockbuster button, but they push something else. I think they push their way into our hearts. They connect with individuals. They connect with people. And they're movies about people. I don't know how to make a movie in outer space about people who I don't know how to make a superhero movie. So I make movies about people who I think are superheroes, librarians, social workers, people who are unsung, people who don't get movies made about them. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the humanity of that connects us all. And so I'm going to continue on this journey because these are the movies that I want to see, and hopefully that vision is shared.
This next one's for me, so you can go sit down. Okay. It says the movie depicts a tenuous relationship between homeless individuals and law enforcement. Ryan, what's your reading and what's your take on that relationship between homeless individuals and law enforcement? So I travel a lot of the country doing training for libraries and for law enforcement and park districts and whatnot. And so I go into a lot of communities that have a really, really bad relationship between law enforcement and the police, where, again, absolutely criminalization of poverty, individuals kind of really, really preying upon, abusing their power. But I don't see that in Aurora. Aurora is it's different. And I think Hesed House gets to take some of the credit for that, and Bill Rowley, wherever he is at, gets to take some of the credit for that, because Bill. So Bill Rowley was our COP officer back in 2004, and came out and said, "Hey, nobody at the police department really knows anybody at Hesed House. Why don't we let's talk?" And so we started having conversations, and the conversations haven't ended. And I think the relationship between the two communities has only gotten better over that time. But it's taken a lot of work on both sides. And so thank you, Bill, and thank you, APD. You guys you've been great to work with.
So I have a question for Ryan. What can Aurora do to better to serve all?
I'm gonna go a little policy wonk on you guys, but the future of homelessness is ending homelessness for individuals experiencing chronic homelessness. So people have been homeless for a very long period of time, and we know what the solution is to it. It's called permanent supportive housing. Hesed House just opened up 16 units a couple months ago. So we've got individuals who've been at Hesed House since Ronald Reagan was president, who are now in their own apartments. That is the solution, and that's what Aurora and the rest of the country needs to be doing, not managing homelessness, but ending it, because we know how to do it now. Beyond box office success, how would you deem this movie a success? In 6 months, 2 years, what does your wildest dreams for this movie look like?
So my hope is that the film, if it doesn't start a conversation, it continues one, that people see the film, that they're, first of all, entertained, because I think it's an entertaining movie, but it also, my hope is that people who see it would start to check their bias at the door when it comes to experiencing people on the street and interacting with people on the street, experiencing homelessness. We all have a story about how a certain individual may have gotten there. I think we need to stop that, because that's just a story, and we need to interact, and we need to find out the reason how that individual got to where they are. Homelessness is it's not a condition, it's a situation. So I'm hopeful that the film can help promote a healthier dialogue, that people will see this and be able to put a face and a name and humanize people who are on the street. And that's, again, of course, if it's successful at the box office, I get to do this again, which is great, which is, a goal. But at the same time, we look at a movie like The Way, and I don't know how many people saw that film, but here's a film that was against all odds, got zero support from Spain, because they thought, who are these Americans coming in and telling us how to, make a movie on one of our national treasures? But since the release of the film, it has inspired tens of thousands of people all over the world to get up and walk 500 miles across the north of Spain. It has improved the economy, direct impact to the economy of the north of Spain. So much so that the New York Times wrote about it, that the film has helped get Spain out of some of its financial doldrums. So if a movie like that can actually do this, think about what this picture could do in terms of the national conversation to help the lives of those who are less fortunate than us.
So this was actually the second screening in Illinois. Unfortunately, you guys didn't get the Illinois premiere. The Illinois premiere happened a few hours ago at Hesed House, individuals living there. And they knew they were getting a Q&A with me afterwards. They didn't know they were getting a Q&A with him afterwards. So Emilio, what was that like?
Well, it's pretty exhilarating when you see individuals who rarely see themselves portrayed on screen, and when they do, it's not in this fashion. When they saw themselves acting as heroes and treated with dignity. And I think, again, this is the second time we've seen it with a group of individuals experiencing homelessness, and it's very moving. They're empowered by the film.
At one point, Emilio said, did I get it right? And somebody goes, oh yeah, you got us right. That's us.
Yeah.
So, on a little bit lighter note, so I don't know how to ask this without just asking it. Can you tell them?
No, there was no body double.
Oh. We were doing a Q&A at the American Library Association in front of 1,000 people, and the very first question was, did you use a stunt butt?
Right. Which I wasn't sure how to take. That was a very strange question. I was like,
no, he didn't use a stunt butt. Oh, man, I forgot. Oh, I know what my question was. So can you talk a little bit about, there were some allusions to some prior movies you made, maybe another movie that you made in a library, a number of years back?
Sure. Sure. There's a couple of, there's an Easter egg in here, in that there's the scene where the librarian is reading to the children in the children's library. She's reading Ali Sheedy's book, She Was Nice to Mice, which Ali published when she was 11 years old. So that's a little Easter egg. The almost Letterman jacket that I'm wearing, the blue Letterman, yes, that's definitely a callback to Breakfast Club. So we wanted to be self-conscious, but not so much so that it was this constant reminder. The fact that we were in a library in a lockdown, our self-imposed attention was, I thought, enough, right, to sort of.
And then I got one final question for you. So independent film doesn't have the marketing budget that the blockbusters have, that some of the big studios have. And so for this movie to get out there and for the conversations to be had about homelessness in libraries, it's going to take people like, maybe some people in this room. What can people in this room do to make sure that this movie gets out there and can spark the conversation?
So I liken this to, so think about the big studio movies, the tentpole films, like Big Oil. It's like they go out into the desert and they bring all their drilling equipment and they drill down into the earth, into your wallets. And they extract all the cash, which is why you see these blockbuster movies doing blockbuster numbers like $150 million opening weekend. I'm out here with a divining rod and a shaman trying to our efforts are grassroots. And what we're doing with this tour is ginning up our base, creating a grassroots movement. We are going to land in New York and do more mainstream press, like the Today Show and Fallon and Rachel Ray. I don't know why I'm going on Rachel Ray, but I am. I'm sure we'll do some cooking and have some fun. She's great. But Kelly and Ryan and all of the mainstream stuff. But in the meantime, before we get there, what we're doing is we're taking the film to the people. We're getting reactions. And what we hope for is that the word of mouth on this spreads. Hopefully people want to see this, so that by the time we hit the mainstream, the groundwork has been laid. And that the word of mouth is strong. So we are going to depend on that. We're going to depend on these grassroots screenings and movements and word of mouth to get it out there. So I can't do this alone. It took me 12 years to get here, and up until this point, I've felt very alone. So I'm going to lean in to you for help.
Which means, tell your friends, tell Facebook, tell Twitter, tell any of the other Twitty things that you do. Tell them, get the word out there, get people into the theaters, because a movie like this, its success will happen based on word of mouth. And so you guys really, he did the first 12 years. We've got the next month or so. So you guys absolutely have a role to play. And so unfortunately, our day tomorrow starts at 7 a.m. In Chicago, and so we're going to have to sneak out. But if you guys could, on just for me, thank Emilio one final time for making this movie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Aurora. Woo! Thank you.